everybody on Westworld is so smart and so informed and really into art and architecture. And we were having a very preliminary meeting about the scope of season 3. And Jonathan Nolan, the showrunner, says, we need a Delos campus. He's like, any place in the world, just show me the most fucking badass place you can find. And I'm like, okay, because we had talked about Brasilia before. We were talking about like the Google campus or what that looks like. And I was like, well, have you looked at the City of Arts and Sciences? And they were like, no. Locations, go to 2. Switching. Go from Mandi on 2. This is Mandi Dillin coming to you from Locations on 2.
And this is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2, the podcast taking you on set with location professionals working around the world. You can find me online at doddvickers.com. Locations on 2 is brought to you by the Location Managers Guild International. The LMGI is a global organization of location professionals working in the film, television, and commercial industries. Find out more by visiting them online at locationmanagers.org. My guest on this episode of the podcast is the amazing Mandi Dillin, probably best known to our listeners for her collaboration on the award-winning Westworld. Mandi also had the opportunity to collaborate on some other amazing shows, including The Revenant, Interstellar, Need for Speed, Iron Man 3, Django Unchained, The Dark Knight Rises, Frost Nixon, and Click. And once again, it's time to jump over to the back channel where the real work gets done on set. Bring her back online. Locations on 2. Well, we better go ahead and get to the interview part of this conversation. I can't remember where you grew up, Mandi. Did you grow up out west or up north?
So I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, which is on the northern part of Ohio, right in the armpit of Lake Erie. Mm-hmm. And I say that with the most love. My childhood was spent going back and forth between Ohio and Michigan. Toledo used to be a part of Michigan, so I've always identified as this bi-state type of person. And my first love actually was music. My family is a huge immigrant family from Canada and Poland, and there was always somebody involved in music in some generation. So my great aunt was a Carmelite nun. She was a music teacher. Yeah, which was interesting. When you have a huge Polish family, someone's going to be a nun. Visiting her at the convent in Detroit, and it was so interesting. And she was one of the most wonderful, gentle people I've ever known. Yet she chose Sister Doloretta, which is, there's an amount of sadness associated with that name. But my father played.
How so?
Doloretta. So in Spanish and in French, the DOLOR is sad. So I don't know why she chose Doloretta. So I think always of little sadness when I think of her. And that was so much not who she was. She was this warm, wonderful, caring person who just devoted herself to music and God.
Did she never get a chance to tell you why she chose that name? Is she still with us? Or?
Oh, she's passed. And, I think she passed away when I was in high school. These were all. Oh, okay. All of my Polish relatives were very old. My grandfather was one of 14. My mom, my mom's one of 5. My dad's one of 7 on the Canadian side. So we've always had all sorts of people. And, when I was a kid, I didn't know if they were my direct aunt or my great aunt or who these people were. But, Sundays were spent going from church to people's houses and having tons of coffee cake. And
it's funny. We had a similar childhood.
Oh, really?
In a sense. Well, my mom was an only child. And so we had all these extended family that were always with us on weekends and holidays and whatnot. And I came to find out much later, they were all great aunts and uncles, not uncles and aunts.
Oh, it's wonderful to be surrounded by, so it's nice to, be involved in, this cultural, existence that I didn't really realize how ethnically I was raised until I came to LA. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the music, so my great aunt was a music teacher. My father played clarinet. My uncle was a concert pianist and went to the Peabody Conservatory.
Oh, wow.
So, music really was my first love, and that's where I spent a lot of time. I actually didn't become interested in working in film until I got to college.
What instrument did you say you played again? I'm sorry.
Piano.
Piano.
So
Okay.
as early as I could sit up, which was probably age 3, my whole life was spent at the piano. And I practiced for probably 6 hours a day from, let's just say, age 6 to about, 14 or 15. And I wanted to go the concert route, but I would choke. I would get in front of an audience at a recital or a larger venue, and I would get so nervous that it doesn't matter how perfectly I could play this 12-page piece, how wonderfully I had it memorized. I would just get so nervous, and my brain wouldn't connect to my fingers.
Really?
Yeah. So I ended up playing a lot of smaller, sort of salon type things at friends' parents' houses. I don't know if it's like this in the rest of the country, but in Ohio, everybody seemed to have a piano in their house. So my friends' parents would always invite me to come and play for them. And that's mostly what I did. And I really enjoyed it.
But when you went to college, you didn't go to college for film or for music.
No, I actually went to University of Michigan for medicine. I had always wanted to be a surgeon. So from when I was very small up until, my freshman year of college, I wanted to be a cardiovascular surgeon. I did this program in high school called the Senior Project, where you followed around a professional in the world you wanted to enter. And so I followed 2 cardiac surgeons at one of the hospitals in Toledo. And I got to do all sorts of stuff that you probably can no longer do as an 18-year-old. But I was, getting up at 3 a.m. and scrubbing in. And the very first day of my 2-week internship, the nurses had me pulling pacemaker wires. And they brought me into this room, and there were some very elderly people in there. And at the time, the wires actually went through the skin. And gave me a pair of pliers, and they said, go ahead, just pull on the wires and they'll come out. And they showed me.
Man, you're not kidding.
Wires pulled out at this time. They made a zipper noise.
Oh, geez.
And I had never been freaked out about blood or anything like that. But the second they gave me those pliers and I pulled out the pacemaker wire, I just fell straight back and fainted.
Holy cow.
I remember waking up and I was so embarrassed. I think I was out for like 30 seconds, but they were all giggling. So I feel like that was a rite of passage that the nurses put.
So was that the end of it as far as your dreams of being a doctor, or did you continue to pursue it?
So I did my senior project for a couple of weeks, and then I went to University of Michigan with the plan of entering their 6-year accelerated medical school program. And I actually took a film class as an elective my freshman year. And I just had my eyes open to this whole new world that I had never really thought about before. And much to my parents' dismay, I changed my major and actually completed film school.
Wow. Well, what was your plan when you were in film school? What were your dreams at that point? What did you think you were going to do with this when you got done?
While I was in film school, it was just exploring the medium. So while I was in film school, I thought that I wanted to get into cinematography. And at Michigan at the time, this is the late 90s, we were shooting on 16 millimeter, and the film classes were very competitive. We had some faculty who actually had, Hollywood movies made. And so a lot of people were aspiring to make their own thesis film. And that was just it's not what I wanted to do. So I focused on video art and television. And I'm so glad I did, because the technologies we were using in the video art and television classes are what people really are focusing on today. So instead of hand splicing together my own 35 film, which I did, I made some 16 millimeter experimental art films. I was really making television shows and doing all sorts of video art and getting familiar with the Avid. And I didn't know it at the time, but that really informed a lot of what I ended up doing in my career, especially in terms of the TV production.
Right. And so you came out of film school and you had an interest in cinematography, but is that what you were focused on getting into when you got out, or did you find another direction?
Well, when I was in college, I discovered the role of assistant director. And it made sense to me because I had been a stage manager for musicals ever since high school. So
okay.
yeah, so even in high school, when I wasn't at all interested in pursuing a career in the arts, stage management was still exciting to me because you're kind of running the show in a behind the scenes way. And through the course of my education, I learned about the assistant directors and I learned about the DGA training program. And I thought, wow, this is great. I can go to LA. I have a plan. So when I was in college, I applied. And let me tell you, in 2001, when I applied for the first time, the testing for the DJ training program is intense. It is a multi-step process that starts with a written test for which the study guide was the LSAT training manual.
Like a law degree.
Yes. So my parents and I drove from Toledo to Chicago, which was about a 4-hour drive. It was the middle of winter. I will never forget. It was one of those days where the wind was so icy, it felt like you were getting stabbed. And I took the test. And long story short, I ended up progressing through the process and was invited to do the final stages of testing in LA, which included group testing and in-basket training is what they called it back then. And then I made it to the final round and walked into a room, full of ADs, and I'm 22 years old, had never stepped foot on a film set, a real film set before. And I was chosen as an alternate. If you're familiar with the training program, people don't drop out of the DGA training program. You have to be kicked out or die. But I moved to LA hopeful, that something would happen. And I think I was one of 2 alternates that first year. So I moved to LA with very little money in my pocket, hopeful that that would come through, and ended up getting a couple of internships at production companies, and also had a bunch of weird, odd jobs like at, FedEx.
Well, you do what you have to do to stay afloat.
You got to be a hustler when you move out here. I was really lucky to find a great place to live. On the last day that my mom and I were here looking at apartments when I came for the final round of testing, I ran into one of my college friends on Venice Beach, completely randomly, who was renting a room in this house in downtown LA. Hooked me up with the landlord. I ended up renting this room for $200 a month. And it turns out, now knowing what I know, it's one of the oldest residential buildings in Los Angeles.
Oh.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Eventually my meager...
Which building is it?
It's a home in this mansion district at Pico Union.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a private house, but I remember the wallpaper was so old, it had looked like fossilized leather.
Really?
And the light switches were the push-button light switches, original from God knows when.
Right.
And it was this really cool house where a bunch of really interesting people lived. It was myself and my colleague, Dave, and another person had rented the 3rd bedroom upstairs. And then there was a servant's quarters underneath the kitchen stairs on the back porch. And this gentleman named Akbar lived there, and he was a drummer in a samba band. And I'll never forget, I'm so happy because I'd come home and I'd hear this pop, 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 this drumming all weekend long. And it was the best. It was this awesome little community of random people put together in this house.
That sounds awesome. No, I just had to ask because as a former architecture student, I still have this love of old architecture. And I just was wondering if it was a building or place that I would have known.
This house was definitely from the early 1900s. So I think it was originally built, I want to say 1890, and was renovated in the 1900s. It's this very, very old district. And so knowing what I know now, being an architecture buff, was actually pretty cool to look up that address and find out the history of my first home in LA. But I had to get a job eventually, and I ended up going to a placement agency. And as soon as I walked in, the woman said, "Oh my gosh, you were going to be perfect for CAA." And I was like, "Great, what's CAA?" She said, "A talent." And I said, "What is that?" Oh. So I ended up working for a senior partner at CAA for a year. And I'm so thankful that I got placed on his desk because he was a very nice man who said, "Look, you don't need to go to graduate school. You don't need to go work anyplace else. I will tell you everything you need to know about the business, and you can have any job you want after you work on my desk for a year. Which by that point, I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll work in the agency. This is not what I moved out here for, but maybe, working on set isn't my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this agent had amazing clients. I mean, he had Tony Scott, Oliver Stone, Betty Thomas, Harold Ramis, Brian Helgeland.
Wow.
Lots of people. I know I'm forgetting 3/4 of them right now, but it was such a great education in introduction into the lives of these people. And my job after the agency was actually working as a personal assistant for a producer, Jim Scotchtaple, who, thank God, forgave the terrible job I did for him as a personal assistant. I've been as a location manager since then. But it was awesome because he was working on Alexander at the time, the Oliver Stone movie.
Sure.
And that was my first foray into working internationally. So we were exploring Thailand as a filming location. He took me to Thailand. And it was really cool to be brought on that trip and start to see how you lay out this international production.
It's funny that you mentioned that. It's a different direction than I've heard before, but at the same time, a great way to get some, a little bit of background and training, especially for the types of productions that you do now.
Exactly. I remember having long conversations with Christian McWilliams, who was the location manager in Morocco that they had been speaking to. And a few years later, I actually ended up working in Spain and Africa on a movie called Kingdom of Heaven, which was directed by Ridley Scott.
Great film.
Yeah, so that was my first real production job. I mean, I had done a summer as a PA on RSA commercials, but my first real production job was technically as a translator on Kingdom of Heaven. I spent a year abroad working in Spain and North Africa, and it was such an amazing experience. And actually, J.J. Hook was the location assistant on that movie.
Oh, really?
Jack Alone was the location manager. Yeah, and I just remember hearing them talk, when I was sitting in the production office about all the stuff they did and having to get a generator out here, because you're in the middle of the desert. I mean, you're in a city, right? Ouarzazate or Essaouira or Marrakesh, but it's still very, very rural, especially some of the huge sets and huge scenes that they did for Kingdom of Heaven.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
I remember getting very sick. Well, I don't remember getting very sick because I was in a heat coma for like a month. And they bussed me out to the filming location to see the medic out there. And I remember driving it must have been a couple of hours to the middle of the desert. And we get there, and there must have been 500 background, this huge, huge battle scene. And I was just blown away. It was like we were making Ben-Hur. It was so.
and it's a Ridley Scott production on top of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Great introduction.
It was amazing, though. It really gave me insight as to how productions are pieced together because, I was in Spain and Morocco. And then when you see the movie, we would shoot an interior in Spain, an exterior in Morocco. And I was like, oh my God, they just did something amazing, And it really, it blew my mind, which might sound remedial, but when you're there and you're seeing all this stuff in person, and then you see how it's edited together, it's incredible. And, the ability to weave a story through all these different geographical locales into one consistent piece is what, to me, is the most impressive about some of that stuff. And that's what we've been doing now, especially on season 3 of Westworld, is being able to look at the world as your oyster and figure out where in the world can I grab these pieces from, pieces of scenes, not even whole scenes, pieces of these scenes, and put them together so you don't lose the integrity of the scene and everything looks the same. You're telling the same story, but you're doing it on, different continents.
Right. So when did you begin to make your transition to location management? Because, here you are taking a break, waiting on your next opportunity for the DGI as an alternate for that year. Do you have to start over the next year as well and reapply, or being an alternate the year before, does that give you an in for the next time?
So I was an alternate the second time I applied as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because when I went in the second time, I was actually working at CAA, and I remember they asked me, it was a really intimidating circle of people. They were literally placed in a circle, and you kind of sat in the middle of them in this conference room. and you're young, you're like, you're
Yeah.
in your 20s,
Right.
you know, you don't know anything. And they walk in like you're supposed to know everything. And they're like, impress me. But that's a part of a training program, is to be trained. So I came in for the second round, and I didn't have to do as much testing, but I did have the interview. And I remember one of the people asked me, well, why are you working at an agency? Where is an agency going to get you in terms of working in production? And that's when I told them that I was actually working with, you know, one of their own, Jim Scotchable, going, you know, overseas to work on Alexander. And they were like, oh, okay. And that's all they said. And they gave me the alternate position again. And then I was like, you know what? I have to move on. You know, like there's something I need
Yeah.
to do if this isn't working. And I actually got into locations in a roundabout way. I returned from Kingdom of Heaven in the summer of 2004, I think. And I was kind of burnt out, really tired because I was gone for almost a calendar year. And my friend's husband was an AD on this movie called Fun with Dick and Jane. It was a Jim Carrey remake.
Oh, sure.
And he said, yeah, you know, the location department, they need an office person. It should be pretty easy. You know, I'm like, well, what is it? And they're like, administrative stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, like I need a job. I can't just sit here.
Right.
And little did I know it would change my life. I received a phone call from Molly Allen, the location manager. And
Oh, yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's awesome. And she basically was like, hey. And I said, hey. She said, can you count to 10? And I said, yeah. She said, do it. And so I did it. She said, you're hired. And so I started office coordinating. And very, very soon after I started that job, I was like, this is it. This combines all of my passions, you know, the organizational skills, the accounting, the haggling and deal making, as well as the artistic stuff, which I got to later. But I just had the revelation that this is it, and this is what I wanted to do. And so Molly got me into the union, and I've been fortunate enough to work in locations ever since.
It's great to hear you talk about that route, because there's a lot of great other people that support the location department and are critical components to what we do. The location coordinator being one of them. I've got a good friend who does that job and does it incredibly well. And essentially she's a key. You know, you take on a lot of responsibility in that role. You've got a great key. Was it David Park?
David Park. He moved up to manager. So
he has.
So this year he moved up to manager, which makes me sad, but I'm lucky enough to have the opportunity to work with other managers on my job, so I can't wait to steal him.
Those other positions are so critical to what we do. And one of my plans for the podcast is eventually I'll have some of those other people that work in the department come on so we can elaborate a little bit on their contribution to the film beyond just scouting and whatnot. There's so many pieces of locations that really have to come together to make this work. And I've always felt like we're only as good as the people that we bring on to the team.
I am only as good as the worst person on my team,
because
there's no way in hell that I can get these jobs done by myself, you know, and, you know, just because it's the most recent, you know, like Westworld is the perfect example for that. And I always have to make the argument to the producers that, in my opinion, in addition to the prepper keys, right, the set keys that prep locations, the two most important people besides myself on my team is my office coordinator and my set closer.
Yeah.
Because my office coordinator runs the budget. If I die, God forbid, but if something happens to me, she has all the information. And my set closer, who I never have an assistant location manager as a set closer, because that person is given the responsibility of managing the set, making decisions. I don't want to be called at 3:00 in the morning. I give them an allowance. I'm like, hey, whatever needs to happen, you can spend up to X amount, you know, tonight, if you need to make any last minute deals or if things change, you know, like you give them the power and the responsibility and the respect to do the job that you're paying them for, you know, like,
right.
I don't want to be the hero. I have enough responsibility on my plate, managing the producers and the director and the DP and the AD and the scouting and everything else I do. I want the people on my team to be a part of the team and have ownership for what they're doing and for the project as a whole.
Yeah. I come from a hospitality background, and I love the fact that you mentioned ownership, because that was one of the things at the Ritz-Carlton that we really trained our teams for was ownership. If there's a problem, you own it and you can fix it. You don't need my help to fix it. You can talk about it after and figure out if there's a better way, but you should be empowered and own this problem and fix it. And it's all part of good training to bring the people on board that make the whole team, a success.
Exactly. And it's funny that you mentioned training, because my team jokes that we have a Mandi Dillin training academy happening. I actually wrote a training manual for new people who come to my team, whether it's a key or...
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So I have, the way I like doing things, which is not dissimilar from the way other people do things, but it's just sort of a statement of expectations and a statement as to how the paperwork should be, because, location department gets a lot of flack. I know we're trying to raise the bar and raise the prestige of what we do, because it is an important and very unique job. But I do think all the little ways we're represented, even in our maps.
Yeah.
I want the maps to look the same. I want the schematics to look the same. I have a dress code, which my people laugh at me for, but I want us to look professional, walk into any situation, and just sort of be a united front. Because for better or for worse, that it brings a certain level of acceptance, I guess, from the outside world and the film crew, which, in the location department, we straddle both worlds, which is one of the best things about the job.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the dress code, because, I'm a little bit of the same way. I'm a lot more flexible with the PAs that are there on set every day doing the hard, sweaty work during these hot summers. But, I have a PA that I promote to an ALM position, and before I know it, he's turned around, he's got pants and a collared shirt on, and I'm like, who are you? And he's like, well, I heard this was the expectation, once you move up you got to change. And I'm like, I hadn't even told you about this yet.
Collared shirts are spelled out, or plain t-shirts. Yeah. I've been lax in the older years, but plain t-shirts are now allowed.
So it sounds like it was pretty early into this transition that you realized locations was where you wanted to be, and that this was going to be your home and your career.
Yeah, it was actually right there, like as the coordinator on Fun with Dick and Jane is when I was like, this is it. And then I just fell more in love with the job, with the other jobs that I did. I went from working with Molly to working with Ralph Coleman, who's a great, great unsung location manager.
Sure. Ralph did
and then
Click,
Liz
I think, right?
I did Click with him, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Ralph, I knew that.
I went right on to that from Molly. So I worked with Ralph on and off for several years. And, part of the third part of what I call my holy trinity, the people who sort of raised me when I first got into the business of locations was Liz Matthews.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've talked about Liz.
Who's unfortunately no longer with us, but it was really...
Yeah, I was talking to Madeline Bell just the other day about Liz.
Yes. I know that Liz had retired out in Tennessee, and she had a beautiful last couple of years of her too short life.
Yeah.
But, Molly got me in the business, showed me, the great foundation. Ralph really put me in the fire, coordinating for him. And then he gave me my first location on my own, which was the Standard Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. And as a key assistant, I was like, oh my God, it was so scary. but I did it. And then once I started working with Liz is when I really got into scouting. We worked on a feature called Next, which was one of the most fun experiences of my life because it was a road movie. It was a road movie throughout Southern California, and I started doing a lot of scouting, and I was out in the desert a lot. I got to look at the Mojave Boneyard, which is this great, airplane graveyard, as well as the SoCal Logistics Airport, which also had a great boneyard. We traveled up to Big Bear and looked at these amazing restaurants that were perched on the end of a cliff, this very serpentine road going up to the mountains, and you have this random restaurant that's no longer in operation, as well as on the Havasupai and Hualapai reservations
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, we were all over the place, and it was so much fun. I just remember laughing so much on that show, and
which
finally...
show? I'm sorry, which show was it again? Next.
So it's a movie called Next, this
oh, yeah.
hilarious Nick Cage movie.
Oh, yeah, he's like a magician that has foresight or something, right? I kind of remember this.
Yeah, of course. Exactly. But we
Yeah.
had such a good time scouting all over the place. And, I got a great camera, started taking photos, had zero skin on my fingertips from taping all of my pictures onto folders. So that's what we were doing at the time. And again, it was like getting out on location, like being on the reservations was amazing. When we went to the Havasupai reservation for the Tech Scout, they had just had a big storm. And so you could go down the canyon by donkey, which is
Okay.
what I did once,
Uh-huh.
or you could go down via helicopter, which is what I also did only once. Because I was like, there's no way this is going to be my daily commute. And so we sort of divided up because the Hualapai reservation was on top of the canyon, Havasupai was down below. My location was the Hualapai reservation, and I got to stay at this dude ranch and work with these guys, and they launched the helicopters from there for our daily in and out of all of our stuff for filming. And it was amazing. It was such a great experience that really sort of laid the basis for the wanderlust that ended up taking over my life for the next almost 10 years I was on the road.
Right. So the first three that really kind of trained you up for what you're doing now were Molly. And Ralph and Liz. Then
after that, I started working with ILT.
Right. And that would have been for Transformers, I guess, right?
Yep. The first show, let me see. I think the first show I did with ILT was a show called Wednesday, which never got greenlit, but I scouted on it for a long time. I think the first show I did with him was actually Inception.
Okay, because it's so hard to tell sometimes when you're looking. I just pulled up your IMDb, and the first thing I saw was Transformers, then Inception, but you just can't tell because sometimes things are produced beforehand.
Was it that order? Man,
it's so hard to tell because, as you know, things can be produced or you can work on them, but it may come out in a totally different order than you worked on them. It's just so hard to predict. You just never know.
Yeah, that could have been it because I did work on Transformers 2, which was great. I got to go to New Mexico for that and check out White Sands Missile Range and Alamogordo Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, which was really fun. I mean, the sets they built out there were so impressive. And, Kai Efron was the other key assistant out there, and he was in charge of...
You broke up there. Did you say Kai Efron?
Kai Efron.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
The other assistant. So he was dealing with White Sands and Holloman, and I was working at I think it was Apache Reservation up in Ruidoso.
Oh, okay.
So that was really cool because that was my first experience in, this is where we're filming. It's in the middle of nowhere. The road has been washed out because of storms. There's a bunch of trees in front of the pathway. How do we get out? So I became very, very good friends with the logging company up there. And, it's sort of what other people have touched on, like the best part of adventure filmmaking or even filmmaking in general, when you're sort of stuck in the situation where it's like, wow, there's a 5-mile road that we have to take to get into the location. It's now a rain slick and there are huge boulders in the road and huge trees in the road. What are you going to do? You just figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You use other
and that is one of the fun parts and one of the most challenging parts of our job is thinking on your feet and the problem solving.
It's one of my favorite parts of the job.
Yeah.
Besides scouting. I mean, scouting is amazing. I've been really lucky to do a lot of scouting for long periods of time. So, for the first Iron Man, which reunited me with Molly, gosh, I got to look for Afghanistan and all of our locations out in Lone Pine. I think I spent a month or so just driving around Lone Pine, both by myself and with the film contact out there, Chris Langley. And we got to go through all these caves and canyons. And it's so refreshing just to be set loose in the wild like that and have somebody say, find me the coolest stuff that works for this scene. That was probably one of my favorite scouting experiences. Also, Black Panther, I scouted for ILTs on that in Asia, and that was so much fun and so cool. And, just brought me so much joy from meeting the people, in South Korea and Singapore, but also just being out there and having those moments where I'm like, holy crap, like I'm getting paid to do this. I'm getting paid to take these awesome photos, to send them to LA, to make the contacts, to help sell the coolest, best looking locations for this project. And it's such a good feeling.
Yeah. So Next was really one of your formative production experiences as far as the broadest scope of work and the diversity of the work that you were doing.
Yep, it was on Next. So I had done,
right.
The office coordinator thing and started to do some on-set location management. But on Next is when I was really thrown into the fire and did everything, the scouting, and I had a bunch of my own locations, and that was really it. That was sort of like my maturation. That was my graduation from from location school.
Right. Yeah. So with scouting, did you fall in love with it from the beginning? Did you totally grasp the responsibility that was being put on you?
Oh, I loved it because I'm such a people person.
Yeah.
And a lot of scouting is talking to people. You go to a diner. It's the only place that's clean where you can use the bathroom and get some food. And you talk to people at the diner, and you're like, "Hey, man, I'm out here doing this." And one person tells you where to go, and that leads to something else. And not only do you get to talk to these people about their lives, but they also, turn you on to these other places that you wouldn't know by looking at. Well, back then it was a Thomas Guide. Now it's Google Maps. Really human interactions that inform a lot of my scouting experience, in addition to the technology, but it's really people.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite location that you found that way? Talking to somebody at the diner and they say, who you need to talk to is Bob up on the hill next to the red barn.
Oh, man.
You know how it happens. You're just talking to somebody and they point you in the right direction. So,
I was working on Need for Speed up in Northern California, which was another one of my favorite on location experiences. And, just talking to people up there, was really fun and enlightening and so frustrating because that's another place where, people will just tell you as much as you want to know,
right.
Even more than you want to know. But that's what makes that experience so lovely, is just really getting to know people on a fun, personal level.
Absolutely. No, I tell people all the time, it's one of the fun things about the job is not only do I get to meet interesting people, but I get to learn about businesses and jobs that I knew nothing about, or maybe even didn't know existed. I worked on a show where one of the characters worked in a mattress store for a while. And so I spent about a month talking to people in the mattress industry and learning far more about the mattress business than I ever knew.
Absolutely. I need to know what kind of mattress you bought, okay, or what kind of mattress they gave you.
Sure. It's a Beauty Rest Black is what they recommended. It was at the time the premium Beauty Rest is what we ended up buying. So
okay, I'm going to have to make a note of that. We just bought an heirloom, and it's fantastic. But you're right. You sort of become a mini expert on all these things.
Yeah.
On Iron Man 3, I was out in North Carolina with Ilt on that one, and I was overseeing all of our locations in this town called Rose Hill. And we wanted to do a flood. So I'm bummed that the scene is not in the movie as much as I thought it would be or hoped it would be. But, the little boy in the movie ends up getting washed away, and something happens where they knock over or somebody shoots down this water tower.
Mm-hmm.
And through this scene, we actually wanted to flood the town. And the town was on board, but I was like, wait a minute, how many thousands of gallons of water are in each take? And it was something insane. Like, it's a small town, So I basically had to hire a hydrologist to figure out our water abatement plan. And you sort of go into this world and you learn all these random things that you never knew you even wanted to know about.
Right.
But you have to know about it for the job because, the producer, the AD, or even the DP sometimes is going to come up and grill you about what this is. Why are we spending the money? What are we doing? So you kind of have to become a mini expert in whatever it is you're trying to justify at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think of many times I've been talking to people, safety issues and having to bring in a structural engineer to look at the building and do air quality tests to see if it's safe to even bring a crew in there. Sometimes people are amazed and they just kind of look at you and go, I just assumed you picked a place and just came and did a contract and showed up and started filming.
No, it's so much more involved. And that's what, makes me crazy sometimes is because people see the surface of what we do. And then when you dig into it, there's a lot of jurisdictional stuff, like Mike Fantasia was talking about, we had the same thing on Need for Speed where we had to deal with nesting birds in the season of the year. And we got into this huge thing with the California Coastal Commission about what is in the rights of the public and what is in the rights of the film industry. And it was a 4-month-long approval process, which culminated in a hearing down in San Diego. And eventually we got permission to drive cars on the road, which is what our permit stipulated and which is what we were asking to do. But you really become informed about all these really random things that, for me, have helped the next project down the line or 2 projects down the line. Like, some of these things come back to haunt me, and I'm like, wow, thank God I got so into that, at that time, because now we're dealing with a similar situation, and at least I know a little bit, and I can dive in deeper,
Yeah, and it comes from experience, the number of shows you've worked on, the different types of shows you've worked on. You gain additional experience. I had a show that I picked up. Another location manager had to leave. I inherited the show and inherited some crew that weren't as experienced as some others that I've worked with. And, this one individual had been promoted and never managed at all before. And she's asking me questions, and I'm giving her names and phone numbers, and she's asking, how did you know who to call? And I'm like, well, I've done this before, and for this situation, here's who you should talk to, and same situation. And it just comes from a multitude of different places over the course of a career doing these things that you gain that experience.
Exactly. And, that's also a good point to touch on, is the diversity of projects. Because if you're sort of working on the same type of thing all the time, you have your tools.
Right.
But for me, that's why I like working on features and television and working on things that are super location heavy and really insane, and other things that might be, only 70% on location and contemporary. But it's, having a wide range of experiences, for me personally, I think makes me a better, well-rounded location manager, because you can sort of tap into all this information from all these different things and have a great point of view instead of, a less narrow point of view. Not saying that people who work on the same types of things are narrow in any way, but I think that when you're sort of hopping between, like an action movie, and then, this period drama, and then this quick, funky, contemporary TV show, I think it's kind of fun to sort of skim across these worlds,
right,
and really add to your, informational toolkit.
Right. During the course of scouting and managing all the different types of shows that you've worked on, do you have a favorite location that you've been able to bring to the table, something that was not considered as for a location until you showed up with something totally out of the box, something different than what they had asked for?
Sort of. The most recent thing that comes to mind is the City of Arts and Sciences in Valencia, Spain, for season 3 of Westworld.
Okay.
That was something I just pulled out of my hat that the showrunner hadn't even heard of before, which really surprised me, because everybody on Westworld is so smart and so informed and really into art and architecture. And we were having a very preliminary meeting about the scope of season 3. And Jonathan Nolan, the showrunner, says, we need a Delos campus. He's like, any place in the world, just show me the most fucking badass place you can think. And I'm like, okay, because we had talked about Brasilia before. We were talking about like the Google campus or what that looks like. And I was like, well, have you looked at the City of Arts and Sciences? And they were like, no. And I just brought up, some Google photos, and he was like, that's it. That's fucking it. We got to go there. We got to make it happen. And so,
but at this point, did you even know that was going to be possible?
No, I was like, right. And I said, you have to put the caveat. I'm like, look, I literally just thought of this right now, because today is my first day of working on this show. So let's talk about it. And, we already had a relationship with Fresco Films in Spain through Game of Thrones and HBO in general. So we just talked about it with them, and much to their delight and probably a little bit of horror, we pulled it off, and they pulled it off. And it turned out to be one of the most impressive, or some of the most impressive landscapes in the show. You have one shot, and you know exactly where you are just by looking at that one shot. You can explain everything about who these people are, about what the Delos Corporation is, with one wide shot of this facility. And that's visual storytelling.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the things that often gets overlooked is the role that the location plays in the character development or in the believability of that character. Obviously, the production designer influences that, the director influences that, the cinematographer, the lighting, all of those things come into place. But you have to have a place to do all that, and that is the location, which is what a good scout or location manager brings to the table.
Oh my gosh, 100%. It's easy to explain that perspective for something like Westworld, right? Because you're world building. Same thing with Game of Thrones. You're world building, so obviously the locations play a character. But for me, even smaller shows I've worked on like Transparent and I Love Dick, who were both with Jill Soloway, and what they ask for on those shows is just fun, fucking funky, interesting spaces.
Right.
And so it's not this big sweeping period piece, this huge thing that's shot on film that's an hour. These are, like smaller pieces, and they just want the cool stuff, so it doesn't matter what's written in the script, as long as the location we offer them fits the story in some way. They are so open to whatever. Both Jill, who I think is now Joey, and Kat Smith, the production designer, were very open-minded to whatever fits the aesthetic. And that's super fun too, because you can just find like these really cool spaces and they'll go for it. And you have the opportunity to just roll with it and have as much fun as you possibly want to have on location.
Yeah. Well, we might as well, you've already introduced the topic of Westworld. We need to touch on that because it is such a great, it's a beautiful show. And you've been become a critical part of that now with the locations you've brought to the table. And how many years have you been working on Westworld now?
This makes 6.
Wow.
So I started pilot in 2014 and I guess 2019 is when we wrapped season 3. And it's funny because we were shooting about every other year, but even when I'm not on Westworld, I'm still on Westworld because
right?
thinking about it.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
And, trying to think about what could possibly work for the next season.
Talk a little bit about that project because it does have such scope and it has evolved from the first season to what it is now. And it's changed as far as locations, the impact of the locations in that project, because the environments have changed from season to season. Talk a little bit about that project and how it's changed for you from the first pilot you shot onto what they're doing now.
Well, the first thing I have to say about Westworld is that it is not completely digital. I have conversations like every month where people think we just shoot plates and then shoot the work on a green screen. Ever since the pilot, and anybody who knows any of the Nolan brothers, that they want authenticity.
Right.
So what you are seeing from the very first day inside Sweetwater on season 1 to the very last day of the huge riot scene, in downtown LA on season 3, authenticity and realism is what we're going for. So everything you see is real. There's slight digital augmentation in terms of, like skyscrapers and stuff specifically for season 3. Mm-hmm. But we always wanted to have the most authentic wow locations and biggest scope. So, on season 1 and into season 2, we were all about the landscapes. And people would come up to me after season 1 and be like, oh, it must be so easy, working on Westworld. And I'm like, about? They're like, yeah, you're just on ranches. And I'm like, first of all, just on ranches. If anyone has made a period piece on a ranch with 300 crew, 200 background, and 104-degree heat in the middle of a Los Angeles summer, that ain't easy.
Yeah.
There are logistics that are brought to the table in regards to, supporting the crew, but also making the show look effortless, giving us the biggest scope possible, but also being able to have a place to put the camera when you're doing, I call it adventure filmmaking. It was the same thing on The Revenant. You have this huge scope, really cool stuff. You want to see the world. You don't want to see the crew. You don't want to see base camp. So where are you going to put it? So there are logistical challenges when you're going for these big scopy things. And, the American Southwest, or this hyper real version of the America Southwest, was the character that we were playing with on season 1. We've always had a presence in downtown LA, even from season 1. So to me, that was one of the great parts of the show, was sort of having our Western world, but also having our interior of the Delos offices. Some of it was on stage, but especially by season 3, it was 100% on location because we didn't have those sets anymore. In season 2, we were going to go on a little world tour for Shogun World and the Raj, which was 1920s India. And we had actually scouted. I spent 2 glorious weeks in Hawaii looking for both the Raj and Shogun World. And we're also talking to people in India, and we had, did a little drive-by of Hong Kong on the way to, why not, because you're there. Our goal for season 2 was to have this international scope, but then, things being what they were, we ended up, I think, quite successfully, shooting LA for India, Edo period, Japan, Hong Kong, future LA, and still parts of our Western world. In season 3, it's the whole new world. And so we're finally able to really leave the US. And, we had filming in Spain and tons of filming in Singapore, as well as, a monumental amount of location work. Locations has, always had a huge presence on Westworld, but this season it was even crazier because although we've always had 2 to 3 units working at the same time, this was 2 to 3 units working at the same time in downtown Los Angeles, while we're still trying to set up like these huge things in Spain and Singapore, different continents, different time zones. Doing a huge action piece in downtown LA when you're trying to only shoot Monday through Friday is really tough.
Oh, yeah.
So you constantly had to pivot. It was a constant negotiation of, okay, we want to do this huge fight scene. We want to do this huge night scene. We have to do this riot scene. We want to shoot on an active construction site. So, the really high quality hour-long TV shows you're basically trying to churn out a movie every 21 days or however long your production schedule is. And we would have sometimes hours to prep instead of days or weeks. And so I'm proud that that show looks so expensive and what's the word I'm looking for? Uniform in terms of the artistic stream we're trying to, weave through it. Because, sometimes we're sitting there like, trying to get the paint to dry before everybody shows up to film just because we have such a reduced prep period. And I think it looks amazing.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. That's why I wanted to get to that for sure, because I know there's been quite an evolution as far as, shooting the first season versus what you're doing now, because in addition to being in other places, you're also in a futuristic Los Angeles. So you're combining, I think, Singapore with LA, some Singapore and Hong Kong, to create this futuristic Los Angeles.
That's true. Yeah. And, in general on the show, there's nothing that exists in the real world. And so, especially this year, since we're sort of like on the streets of future LA, we had a lot of conversations of, well, do we see streetlights? Are there traffic signs? What do trash cans look like? Do we have to remove all this stuff? Because even though we're, quote, in Los Angeles, we're in this different reality. The phones look different. The technology looks different. The clothes are kind of different. So you have to take all that into consideration, and especially in location scouting, find places that are pretty much ready to go, just because of our abbreviated prep times and our appetite for that show. Sometimes we would want to shoot 2 or 3 locations a day, which I know network shows can pull off, with ease. But for us, it's like pushing a boulder through the streets of downtown LA.
Yeah.
God, we got 500 people here. We got 500, just trying to figure out the logistics and also be good neighbors to all the other things that are filming in downtown LA at the time, because unfortunately we couldn't own the city, even though we tried very, very hard to do so.
I'm really curious how your scouting technique has evolved from the first time you got to go out with your nice camera and take some pretty pictures. How has your approach to scouting changed?
I'm definitely a lot faster. I think that, television forces you to have a quick eye and work quickly. Features, I don't think they have as much time as one might have had like in the early 2000s or the middle 2000s. But, for me, I'm definitely more decisive about what I want to have photographed, based on many things, based on, both visuals as well as logistics, right? Especially when you're working in such an accelerated television production schedule. But in terms of me and my technology, I had gone from my Nikon D50, which I loved. That was my first big fancy camera.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm trying to go small. I want something that's portable, that's not heavy. I did get a Canon 60 that is just too heavy for me. I mean, it's beautiful. It takes great photos, but it's just too much to lug around. And so what I always go back to is the smaller Sony NEX camera that
okay.
I'm not going to say how old it is because it's embarrassing, but it still takes great photos.
Well, and that's all that really matters. So yeah.
It is. But I definitely want to upgrade to something that's more small and portable. And, even though I can speak for myself and I think a couple other TV location managers, TV location managers don't often get the opportunity to go out and scout ourselves just because we're in the van, we're in meetings. When I do have the opportunity to go out and scout, I want the photos to be amazing. And my, criteria for whatever piece of technology I pick up is how well does it take night photos?
Oh, okay.
Anybody who scouted for me on my team, that I have such a crazy eye because I hate anything that is slightly blurred or out of focus. I'm extremely particular, about the scout photos, especially night photos. Like I want them to be the most crisp, beautiful, Schulman style photos that you could possibly get. So in terms of technology for my team, I just, nobody has to have the fanciest camera, but I just want to make sure that people are able to use their cameras properly and also take the shots that are, worthy of Architectural Digest.
Well, no pressure there for anybody scouting for Mandi in the future. What brought on that criteria for you as far as what to expect from your people that you send out to take pictures? What was it about night photography specifically?
It's harder to do.
It is hard to do.
And I'm not going to, demean anybody, but, like a landscape shot is relatively straightforward. You can have a landscape shot, have some automatic settings, and for the most part, it's going to look good. But the night photography, especially when you're shooting an architectural property, which is what we do a lot, on Westworld as well, some of the features that I've scouted for, and even transparent, like you have a crappy photo that's not exposed, that's not in focus, that's not properly composed. That's the one chance we have to sell the location, and sometimes what people are asking for, there might not be a lot of options for it. So if I have 5 pictures, if I only have enough time to show people 1 to 5 pictures, they've got to be spectacular. Sometimes there's a certain amount of running and gunning, and there's, I think, 2 instances where I let people take iPhone video or iPhone photos just because we needed an answer on something quickly. And there wasn't enough time for them to go out and get their, fancy setup. But I mean, we're again, we go back to the visual storytelling, right? And so this is how you sell it. And people have less time now to look through stuff, and especially when you're putting photos up on a location website, the production designer, the producers, they're going to get brain drain after the first few photos. So you want to put, 5 to 10 up there that just really tell the story, so they can make a decision quickly and more definitively.
And you talk about the pace because it does, you did do you still do significant amount of feature work, but you have transitioned more into television, and you talk about the pace a little bit. It does Westworld. I mean, I've been lucky. The last couple of episodic things I've done, they've had all the scripts up front. It was blocked, cross-boarded, all of that, so that it felt like I was working on a feature. But that's uncommon, and it seems to be becoming less common. Is Westworld that way? I would think that they would have all their scripts, and they would try and cross-board and shoot it more like a feature than a traditional episodic would.
Are you kidding me? We try. That would be awesome. But we have an idea. Okay, so at the very beginning of the season, for season 3, for example, right? Since that just came out, we had a general idea. So Jonah would say it's all about plazas. It's a pedestrian world, so I want plazas, walkways, elevated walkways. No cars. And so we'd go out and get everything. You sort of like build your basket, build your cachet of what was communicated to us. But then it's like, well, what's cool? Like what hasn't been asked for yet? Like what's something that's architecturally interesting, or something we think we could use this season. So, at the beginning of the seasons of Westworld, I'm like, go out and shoot everything. Just shoot every plaza, every cool building. Let's look at all the hotels. Let's look at the parking garages, like everything we think we could have. So we have a catalog of options. And then I'm trying to think of the timing. Sometimes it's good, sometimes not. For the big stuff, they come through. For something where it's like, okay, we have this huge scene. Start looking for this now, and then everything else kind of falls into place. And that's the thing with that show is every scene is part of this story and part of the aesthetic, and you can't go around the corner and just shoot this little pickup shot. Like if there's something that's added for that day, you really have to be light on your feet and think about, okay, so they're just adding the scene. I have enough time to permit it. Do I have enough time to find it? It's like a quick dialogue pop. But, in Westworld, there's no like quick dialogue pops because you're in this future world,
Right.
So you have to think about, okay, where can we push carts to that's going to, like fit into this aesthetic? And then I have to think, wait a minute, what episode is this? What year is this in the story?
Right.
And it's a challenge, but that's also what makes it fun, There's definitely, my brain is always firing on all cylinders.
Right.
On that show.
Yeah, it's just, it's funny to me because I've done episodic, nothing on that scale, obviously. And because of the scale that you're working in, I just made the assumption that they would know where they wanted to shoot every little scene as far in advance as possible because of the scope of that show, of Westworld.
Well, the broad strokes we do know about, but there's a lot of interstitial stuff that you really have to, kind of pull out of a hat, especially this season. Like I think it was episode 3. I think it turned out to be in episode 3 where Dolores sort of walks Caleb through his life story. And it's like, oh, we're in a diner. We're on a beach. Like those are things that we never, really would have thought about. And so, you just have to work quickly. And that's what this whole sort of like career experience leads up to, right? You kind of know where to go. You might not have photos of it, but you know the city, the permit jurisdictions, and you know what the look is. And so you're just able to kind of instantly, think of options, and they might not all work. But I think it's just sort of like the culmination of, everything that I've been doing or somebody that's been, doing this job for a long period of time just kind of knows. It's like the stuff you just know.
Do you have a location that you've pulled out of your quiver that, you just said, you know what, somebody's going to want to shoot this one day. I'm going to have to, this is going to fit for something, but it's not, I just am taking the time to shoot this and cover it as if it was something that's part of this project. And then sure enough, it becomes something that's critically important to a particular show.
Oh my gosh. I know the answer is yes, but I cannot break through the cobwebs to my brain because I've had that experience a couple of times where we've seen something or I've seen something, photographed it, or had one of my scouts photograph it, and then we just sort of like save it away.
Right.
And I think I call it like the cool folder.
Yeah, I think we all have a cool folder where we keep those. I just had to ask because I assumed there was one somewhere. But I did want to get you, before we leave, to comment on what you tell somebody that maybe is new to the business, they've worked in locations or they've worked near locations, and they approach you and say, what do I need to do to be good at locations? How do you tell them to prepare?
Well, I would say have an open mind and check your ego at the door.
Yeah, for
Those
sure.
are the first things. No job is too small. I think it's really important for people who want to work as a key assistant location manager and get paid as a key assistant location manager to be able to do every single job that's required. So I think that people should come in with a certain sense of humility and desire to learn, and not think that what they're doing when they first start is remedial and unnecessary, but something that's actually going to create the building blocks for their career in general. One funny, well, I think it's a funny anecdote, like when I worked on the first Iron Man, the people who were PAs on Iron Man 1 are running Marvel on Iron Man 3. I worked on shows which were many, many years apart, and you don't sometimes get to the top right away. You have to, like, I'm not going to say earn it, but at least be open-minded enough to explore all facets of that job. Work in the office, do your own paperwork, see what it's like to write 25 POs in a day. Get out there on location. And even though I don't like us having to deal with, picking up trash or anything like that, just be open-minded to embracing the experience of whatever you have to do. Just say yes. Just say yes. See if you like it. Figure it out. Try to do it better, but just be open-minded and be a team player. I mean, that's really, I think, the best advice I can give somebody trying to get in locations, because it is a team experience. It is a collaboration. And sometimes you have to do stuff that you really don't want to do. But you should do it excellently.
Absolutely. I think that holds true for everybody, for sure. Well, before we wrap, I need to ask you what your favorite thing about being a location manager is. What is your favorite part of the job?
I think it's just being part of the creative team, and also having the opportunity to maybe, if I'm lucky, be a mentor to some of my team. I love having new people on my location team. I love teaching people the ropes. I love talking to them about their day, and their experiences on location. I like hearing their ideas. I really like collaborating, and in terms of me, like as my role as a, supervising location manager, I like the collaboration with the showrunner, the producer, the production designer. Your world becomes smaller when you move up to the location manager. And I think a lot of people might not realize that when you're a key, you're talking to all these people, you're doing all these things. And when you move up to manager, your world suddenly becomes kind of small. Like I talk to the same 4 to 5 people every day. I'm in the van with them. I'm in meetings with them. But it's also this extremely open and collaborative process. And that's exciting too. So yeah. I guess to answer your question, it's kind of everything I love about the job.
No, I totally get it. This is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2. I hope you've enjoyed this visit to the back channel where the work gets done on set. Visit me online at doddvickers.com. Locations on 2 is at locationson2.com. And the Location Managers Guild can be found at locationmanagers.org. Until next time, I'm back to 1.